Chapter 17. Soup. The day of Nectar's attack was unseasonably warm and clammy. Thick, grey clouds hung over the town like a damp, dirty duvet. A faint rumble of thunder sounded in the distance, although it might just have been a dog's stomach making a noise not that far away. Frankly, it was too stuffy to care. At Ribbon Robotics, Nectar was making his final preparations. He had emerged from his nest in a good mood that morning, looking forward to beginning the creation of his own private army. For this would bring him a step closer to taking control of the country, which would enable him to ban picnics, get stuck in ice creams, and buzz around in bins to his stripy heart's content. He had breakfasted lightly on 3 chocolate bars and an entire litre of orange squash that he'd slurped straight from the bottle with his long, hollow tongue. Gary the intern had tried to point out the words dilute to taste on the label, but he'd been wasting his time. Nicholas Knox was fussing over him like an overprotective mum on the first day at school.
Now, are you sure you've got everything, evil Lord Nectar?
Yes, Knox, I've got everything,
snapped Nectar. He was dressed in his full yellow and black costume, with black boots, a yellow and black jumpsuit, and a helmet covering his bulging insect eyes. So rather than looking like an evil man-wasp hybrid, he looked like he was part of an insect-themed motorcycle stunt team. This was the first time since becoming an evil man-wasp that he was going to venture outside his factory, and he wanted to be prepared.
Have you got the master uplink system for the mind control helmets?
Asked Knox.
Of course I have.
Nectar raged, his good mood ebbing away.
What would be the point of my going outside this factory for the first time to initiate my evil plan to take over the country using an army of human drones wearing mind control helmets if I didn't take the master uplink system for the mind control helmets with me?
Of course, sir,
reassured Knox.
It's just that the master uplink system for the mind control helmets is over there on that table.
Nectar marched over and snatched up what looked like a chunky black watch, snapping it to his wrist. The master uplink system was the key to the whole mind control technology Knox had invented. Whoever wore that black wristband would be able to command anyone wearing one of the helmets to do absolutely anything. It made you the master of an army of slaves. Or, if you put the helmets on llamas, an army of llamas, a llama army. You could order them to act crazy, making them a balmy llama army. You could also dress them in nightwear and force them to work in a field, making you the master of a balmy pajamaed llama farmer army, but that might be taking things too far. Nicholas Knox's fellow robotics expert Penny Percival was standing to one side. If you remember, she had once invented a fabulous rainbow robot fish that could have solved all the world's clean water problems until Nectar stamped on it. But in the last few months, she had been working hard on a very different project. She had worked hard on it because Knox had snuck up behind her with a mind control helmet and turned her into a helpless slave. Penny's black and yellow eyes watched expressionlessly as Nectar turned to her and asked,
Human drone Percival, do you have the attack drones ready?
All is ready, mighty Lord Nectar,
she replied in a monotone and handed him a small remote control unit.
Press the homing button in the center to summon the attack drones. They will respond to your commands, O powerful one.
Nectar grinned to himself. Being the commander of a slave army was super convenient, though he was a little worried about Knox, who seemed to be getting rather too big for his extremely shiny shoes recently. Never mind, thought Nectar inside his mean, waspy brain. When I have my army of slaves, I won't need him anymore. He caught Knox's eye and smiled unconvincingly. Knox gave a watery smile back, thinking to himself, when I have my army of slaves, I won't need him anymore. That's one of the main problems with being a supervillain. It's really hard to get staff who don't end up plotting against you. Nectar pressed the single yellow button on the black remote control, and immediately there was a loud buzzing from the corridor outside. Gary ran past, making a terrified squeaking noise as Penny Percival's new inventions rounded the corner and came floating in through the open door. There were 4 of them, huge robot wasps the size of motorbikes. They flew with the aid of rotor blades suspended from their metal backs. They had a black-muzzled machine gun fixed to each of their yellow and black striped sides, and inside the gaping mouth of each attack drone was a small blue flame, the pilot light for their inbuilt flamethrower. Basically, since becoming a human drone, Penny had lowered her sights considerably from wanting to save the planet. These machines had been built with one purpose: to destroy the enemies of whoever held the central control unit. Right now, that person was Nectar, and he regarded them with delight. He pressed the yellow button again.
Attack drones, maintain formation, and protect me with full firepower,
He commanded. The drones maneuvered themselves into position, two behind each of his yellow leather-clad shoulders. Right. Go and do my dirty work for me and bring me back a load of superpowered slaves before I snatch the control units away from you and take control of this whole operation, said Nicholas Knox, but only to himself. Out loud, he said,
Your attack vehicles are ready in the front courtyard, mighty Nectar. The coordinates of the school have been pre-programmed. I shall monitor things from here using my spy drones and assist if necessary.
He smiled awkwardly. Nectar grimaced back at him before marching out of the room and along to the lift, humming a dramatic tune in his waspy voice. He was on course to take over the world. Nothing could stand in his way. The lift was out of order, and he had to go down the stairs. The day of Nectar's attack was also the day that Murph decided there was absolutely no point to anything, least of all going to school. It was the morning after he'd discovered the news about his mum's job, and they had hardly spoken since. She had dropped him off early as usual, and he was now sitting moodily behind his empty desk in the entrance hall, doing some really hardcore scowling.
Why are you even bothering going to work?
He'd grumped at her before she'd driven away.
They're getting rid of you. What's the point? What's the point of sending me to school if we've got to move again in the summer? The point is not to give up.
His mum had snapped back at him.
We can't all roll into a ball and refuse to come out of the house just because we've got to move again, Murph.
She softened as she saw how upset he was.
I hate it just as much as you do. Next year, I promise I'll look for something that'll last for longer.
You
said that last year,
finished his mum.
I know.
She sighed. But before she could think of any more mum wisdom, Murph had slammed the car door and trudged away across the road towards the empty school buildings. And now, here he was, looking forward to a morning of helping out the caretaker while the rest of his class honed their superhuman abilities. It was going to be a bad day. Murph was working himself up into such a mood, he even began to feel bitter about his friends. They'd all have forgotten about him in a few weeks' time, he mused to himself furiously, just like last year, and the year before that. And when the next school year came around, they'd just go on without him, while he tried to settle into another new town and another new school. Murph had sunk into such a miserable state that he only grunted when Hilda walked past on her way to the cloakrooms, waving at him. He pretended not to hear Billy's shouted greeting. Mary came up and stamped her foot at him after he responded to her cheery, "Morning, Murph," with a growly bleh noise. "What's got into you today?" she demanded, but eventually walked off in a sulk when he refused to reply. "I thought you'd say good luck at least," she shouted over her shoulder at him. "We've got the PCAT today." Murph had actually forgotten that the rest of his class would be taking the PCAT that day, the test that would determine which CT class they'd be in next year. He felt a tiny spark of pleasure pierce the gloom curtain. Watching the test might be kind of fun. But once again, Mr. Flash appeared on the scene to smush his muffin of hope into crumbs of sadness.
"No more!"
he bellowed, striding towards him.
"Welcome to Hero Day. Not that it concerns you. You won't be watching the PCAT with the rest of the school,"
he continued, as if he were a mean-spirited mind reader.
"Mr. Supermoon's decided it would be best if you stay out of the way, so I've left a couple of buckets and a scrubbing brush in my classroom. Give the floor and the walls a good clean, would you? Some of the third years got a little bit carried away with their capes in Mr. Drench's lesson yesterday, particularly Gareth. He can summon soup whenever he likes, but he hasn't quite got it under control yet. Anyway, if you could clear up the minestrone, that would be lovely.
And he marched off, muttering something about useless capes and soup. Fine, said Murph to Mr. Flash's retreating back.
Great.
He grabbed his bag and was about to head towards the classroom. But suddenly, the whole thing seemed like an intolerable waste of time. Despite what his mum had said, going home and curling up in a ball was the only thing he felt like doing right now. He wasn't even going to be allowed to watch everyone take their pee-cat. It was the final insult. Murph looked around at the drab walls of the school corridor and felt he couldn't bear to spend another minute there. Angrily, he shouldered his bag, and instead of moving towards the CT classroom to begin de-souping, he found himself walking right out of the doors and heading back across towards the school gates.
Murph?
Came a shout from behind him. It was Mary.
Where are you going? I'm going home. I've had enough of this stupid school,
Yelled Murph, rounding on her.
You're all right. You've got a cape. How do you think I feel? I'm only good enough to clean up soup. I don't even like soup. Why are you talking about soup?
Asked Mary, who'd come back to make peace with Murph before her exam and wasn't expecting to have an argument about soup.
And my cape's nothing much to get excited about anyway. You know Mr. Flash thinks I'm useless because I can't do it without the umbrella. It's not just you. Oh, so I'm useless now?
Snapped Murph.
Of course you're not useless. I said Mr. Flash thinks we're useless. But that's the point, isn't it? It doesn't matter what he thinks of you. He's a bully.
Mary had planted her hands on her hips as she entered lecture mode.
And you know the thing about bullies, Murph? They're only powerful if you listen to them. Don't let him get to you.
A part of Murph's brain tried to shake off the gloomy fog that was enveloping him, but it was stuck in place, an oily, suffocating cloud of depression. Even though her reasoning made sense, and actually reminded him of something his mum had said, it was too late. Mr. Flash had got to Murph. In fact, Murph's whole life had got to Murph, and for now, he just needed to be on his own. Ignoring Mary's disappointed face, he walked right through the school gates and headed for home. He was so cross, he didn't really register the 4 very large yellow and black trucks branded with the Ribbon Robotics logo that thundered past him in the other direction as he turned the corner at the end of the street. He didn't even hear the thin whining of the tiny spy wasp that followed him home.